If you were alive back in the 1800s and you made a trip out west,
We weren't.
I know you think we're that old, but we're not. That was a journey that was fraught with dangers. You had to be, it didn't matter if you were a man, woman, or child. You had to be tough and you had to be resilient and you had to be able to adapt because things were changing on a daily basis as you traveled out here. It was a long journey. And then when you got out west, it was a lawless place. You were in danger of Indian attack. You were in danger of being robbed by bandits. The nearest marshal may be a week's ride away, or maybe there isn't a marshal around at all. So back during those days, what was the most dangerous town in the West? Was it Dodge City with the Dalton gang running loose? Or was it Tombstone, where Doc Holliday and Wyatt Earp and his brothers were trying to maintain some law? Well, I gotta tell you, it was none of those. No, it was a sleepy little riverfront town of Fort Benton in central Montana. Back about 1805, Lewis and Clark and their gang came paddling up the river here. After that came all kinds of fur trappers and explorers, and keelboats started coming up here. Those were the ones that had to be poled up and hauled up with ropes, and they brought them up the river. And this area right here became a terminus point for that. Using just the simplest of tools, they built a series of forts up this river. And at first they had built one further up the river than here, than this location. But about 1848, they built Fort Benton here. And Fort Benton wasn't actually a fort, it was more of a trading location, because it was the Blackfeet Indians that requested that it be built here, because they were busy trading furs that were purchased here and taken all the way back east. Yep.
Yeah. And during the days when settlers were coming out, they came out on the steamboats that came up the Missouri River, and Fort Benton was as far as it could go.
Fort Benton was known as the most inland port in the world. This was as far, like Linda said, this is as far as the steamboats could get. And from here, you had to, if you wanted to go further west, which was the whole point, you took horses or a wagon and you took the Mullen Trail over the Rocky Mountains from here and to Walla Walla, where you could get on the Columbia River and continue your way.
Yeah. The fellow that did the Mullen Trail, he started from here, didn't he?
He did, yeah. After that came the gold rush in the 1860s, I believe, and things got to be pretty busy around here, with all kinds of people heading out, and still no law in town. It became very dangerous just to walk down this street, this front street along the river here. They said, keep your eyes straight ahead and don't talk to anybody. And
it's real easy to get killed.
Easy to get killed here, and that's where it got its name as the bloodiest block in the West.
Yep. But Fort Benton later on became known not for its violence, but for a dog and the dog's love for his one-man master, a dog named Shep.
Well, this is a story about a great dog. All of us have had good dogs. Some of us have had really good dogs, and probably a few of us have had great dogs. Shep was one of those. He was a great dog. Nobody really knows where Shep came from, except for that he showed up with a miner that fell ill here in Fort Benton in 1936 and showed up at the St. Clair Hospital. He was a sheepdog, and he set up vigil at the hospital door. One of the nuns at the hospital noticed him and fed him during the few days that the sheepherder was there in the hospital. But when the sheepherder passed away, his family back east requested that his body be shipped back east to be buried. As they loaded the casket onto the train, someone noticed that the dog came out of the bushes and was whining as the casket was being loaded into the car and the door slid shut. As the train pulled away, the dog walked back down the tracks, and that was the day that Shep began his 5.5-year vigil waiting for his owner, his master, to come back home. The story says that day after day, Shep met 4 trains a day, watching for his owner to come back. He was chased off as a mongrel many, many times, but that didn't discourage him, and he just kept coming back every day. It didn't matter how hot the summer was or how freezing cold below zero the temperatures were, Shep was always there. His attention spread. He became world famous. Photographers came from all over to photograph him. People tried to adopt him, not realizing that Shep was a one-man dog. He took to sleeping under the platform, and on the cold winter days they let him sleep inside the station by the fire. He was fed, and you could pet him, but you couldn't get too close to him. You couldn't sit down and hug him or nothing. He'd have none of that. He was just waiting for his owner, the one-man dog. If you've had a dog like that, one that just wanted to be by your side all the time, be sure and leave a comment below. Leave your dog's name. Tell us a little bit about him or her. We'd like to hear it. Linda and I were talking the other day, and we were trying to remember all the dogs that we had growing up from the time we were kids, and we couldn't even hardly remember them all. But we only had one great dog, and that was a dog that Linda and I actually had together. Her name was Annie. Annie was half yellow lab and half golden retriever. Extremely smart. Maybe you've had a dog like this. Annie learned all her tricks in one day. You know, sit, stay, and I mean stay. She wouldn't leave for nothing once you told her to stay. Shake, speak, all the commands she learned in one day, and our young daughter taught all those commands to her. Annie came to us as a stray, and she was just a puppy when we got her, and I didn't even want to keep her. But Becca, we had a store in Hawaii at the time, and Becca Lynn, I think Becca Lynn was only about 13 or something, and Becca Lynn brought her into the store and said, "Dad, watch." And it was only a few days after we had gotten her. And Becca Lynn had taught her all those tricks by hand signals. She would taught her hand signals, and Annie did everything according to a hand signal. One day I needed to train her to heel because you don't want her dragging you on a leash. And I took her across the street to the park, and within a few minutes I'd taught her to heel and stay right beside as we walked with a leash. Annie would do that always anyway after that. She stayed right by your side. If I was camping in a tent, sleeping in a tent, she would put herself right outside the tent door, and that's where she stayed. She didn't want to come in the tent. She wanted to be outside the tent where she could see what was going on. Annie was a great dog. Annie would get me beer. We parked our car underneath the house that we had there in Hilo, and I could be down working on the car. I'd ask Annie to go get me a beer, and Annie would run into the house and get a beer and bring it to me. I couldn't let her do that, though, because she was worse than the kids when it came to closing the refrigerator door. She'd get the beer, but she wouldn't shut the door again.
And there's another thing Annie would do. When we were getting ready to leave somewhere, I would tell her, "Annie, go pee and get in the car." And she would, in that order.
Yeah. Annie understood compound sentences, which is really odd, unusual for a dog. One time she had just a tennis ball that was covered in slobber, and she kept rolling it across the floor at me because she wanted me to play. And I didn't want to deal with a ball. So I told her, I kept telling her no, and I'd put the ball back and I'd say, "Annie, no." And she would...
So I told her, "Annie, ball, stay." She looked at me, she looked at the ball.
She understood. Ball,
she
stay.
left the ball there.
Anyways, tell us about your good dog.
Well, this is where Shep is buried. The railroad company put up an obelisk, buried him here, overlooking the town of Fort Benton and the trains that come through. He died in 1942. By 1942, Shep was getting pretty old. He was hard of hearing and arthritic. He had been meeting the train every day for 5.5 years, 4 times a day. On that day in 1942, he didn't quite hear the train coming, and he was too old and arthritic to be fast enough to get out of the way, and the train did not stop in time. So that was his last day on earth. Good old Shep. And here he lays.
So even Fort Benton, which has its reputation of having the bloodiest street in the West, has its soft side, the story of Shep. Hope you guys enjoyed the story. If you did, like, share, leave a comment. We'll see you around.
Bye!